Good morning, Lighthouse. Hey, it is good to see you. Those who I can't see, if I can't see you and you're watching online, hey, we are glad that you are worshiping with us at home. This morning, we are starting a new series called Mindfull. So I want to start by asking you this question. What are the things that fill your mind? I promise that's not a typo. We did that on purpose. If that was bothering you, it's going to continue to bother you for the next 5 weeks. But we want to ask the question and start thinking through what are the things that fill your mind? Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to explore what some of those things are. But I'll be honest, there are times in my life where I'm not sure if there was anything filling my mind. I want to share with you about one such occasion when I was 16 years old, probably 17 years old. At the time, I was blessed to have an amazing 1996 Ford Ranger. It was green, it was 4x4, and I know it's difficult to imagine this, but it even had a spoiler on it. I know. And I had a friend named Andy, and every day before school, I would go pick Andy up and take Andy to school. He lived pretty close to the school, but in order to get to the road that took us to the school, there was actually a field near that road. And so if you can imagine, Andy's neighborhood's right here. There's this empty field, and then there's like a alleyway here, a cement alleyway, and then a dentist's office right here. And most days, I would come right up to that field, I would kick it into four-wheel drive, and we would tear through that thing. Look, we lived in Texas, and we're looking for a good time. Yeehaw! And especially if it rained, because then it's not just driving through a field, it's mudding. There's no G on the end of that word, by the way. It's mudding. And it was great until the day that it wasn't. You see, as we're tearing through this field, it had rained, the tires were wet, we're kind of slipping, sliding, but we have four-wheel drive, so it's a good time. And then I'd hit the curb on the opposite side of the field into the concrete alley, and my tires got traction. And there was a dumpster. And you guys know on those big alley dumpsters, they've got like the two little forks on the front that they lift into the dump truck. Well, my truck, the front right end of my truck hit one of those, and it flung this dumpster into the alley. So we both get out, and we're like, what was that? The airbag didn't deploy, thank goodness. And we shoved the dumpster like back into place. But as we're doing that, this man from the dentist's office who saw everything walks out. And he asks me a question. And it's a question that we all have been asked at some point. And the question was, what were you thinking? And my response to him was, well, we really calculated that if we were going to do this, there was... No! I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I remember the guy's like, well, you're going to have to give me your license because I'm going to call the police. Like, at this point, there's no damage to the building. The dumpster's back in place. And I was just like, I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to drive to school. This is a school I'm at if you really want to call the police. And we left. And it wasn't a hit and run. No damage was done. So just to be clear on that. Also, if my parents are watching this, they have never heard this full story. So I may get an interesting text after service today. But it was that moment, right? The, hey, what are you thinking moment? And the truth is, I wasn't thinking. Or at least the thoughts that I was thinking weren't about consequences. They were something entirely different. In fact, fun, interesting fact about the brain for you. You know why teenagers and young children do things and you're like, why would you do that? Like why we ask the question, what were you thinking? It's because their prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until the age of 21. So they cannot equate decision with consequence. They're just incapable of doing it. And you get better and better over time. But it literally takes till you're 21 before you really can say, hey, this is the consequence of my decision. So next time you're getting on to your kids, remember that. But the truth is, we all have been in that position. And often, we are faced with our own failures. And it's those moments where we think we're going to just do it the best possible way, and everything falls apart. Or those moments where we do something that is so incredibly stupid that it leads to failure. And it's often when we are faced with our failures that we ask ourselves this question, what was I thinking? It's the moment where I come home early from work and try to be present for my wife and my kids, but I step on a toy walking in the door, and then I realize the thing I asked my son to do this morning still hasn't been done, And my wife asks me what I want from dinner, and instead of responding kind, I do the exact opposite, and I blow up and I walk away going, this wasn't what I intended. What was I thinking? And I know you've been there. And you've asked yourself, like, how did I get here? What was I thinking? You see, the truth is at some point, we have equated poor choices to poor thinking to poor choices, right? We think something bad and the result is something bad. In fact, a pastor I was listening to preach on this subject this week said that if poor thinking leads to poor choices, wouldn't the opposite also be true? That right thinking enables right choices. That if we think that, hey, this is a bad way to think and it led to a bad choice, right? I wasn't thinking. What was I thinking? Well, I definitely wasn't thinking about the consequences, and it led to poor consequences. The opposite must also be true. When we can think and dwell on things that are right and good or righteous in the terms of our faith, it will lead to right or good or righteous choices. And hear me out. I'm not just saying like, hey, this is all about, feeling good and thinking good and putting positive thoughts out here, right? That is not this sermon series. But we do have to wrestle with this idea that if we can think in the right frame of mind, it is going to lead us to the right actions in life. You see, our thoughts and how they impact us are something that is often being discussed right now, right? Mental health is something we talk about frequently. It's in the news, it's in the media, it's everywhere. In fact, this week, my wife and I were watching the Olympics because, as most of you know, right, the Winter Olympics started this week. And as we are watching the opening ceremonies, this is a thought that I have. Didn't I just watch the closing ceremonies last week for the Summer Olympics? Anybody else feel that way? Like, we just finished the Olympics and we're already having more Olympics. But it also, as I'm preparing for the sermon, I did think back to last summer, and I don't know if you follow the Olympics or you even care about it, but like the medal count is really important to me because I have to be better than Russia. I mean, like, I need America to have more medals than I need to be first place. And it's difficult because in the Winter Olympics, we're usually not. So it really bothers me. But in the Summer Olympics, like, that is our time to shine. Russia and China, got to beat them. We have to get more medals. And as I'm watching this, I realize that as we're getting ready for the gymnastics portion of the competition, that the best gymnast in the world, Simone Biles, makes a decision not to compete in several areas that she is expected to win gold in. And in my mind, I'm doing the calculations. I'm like, well, that's like 4 gold medals that we were going to get that we probably aren't going to get now. It's happening again, Chris. It's the Rice Krispies in the microphone. Snap, crackle, pop. Some of you never saw that commercial. And she makes this decision, and I even remember in the moment actually being mad and thinking like, well, just tough it out. Like, you're a competitor, you're an athlete, it's hard. Do hard things. And I'll have to be honest, I had to repent from that because as I started reading about why she made those decisions and her position about her mental health, it is a significant better choice for her not to compete in order to stay healthy in another area. And she chose her mental health over making me happy, and we still ended up beating China and Russia in the medal count, in case you didn't know that. But mental health is a subject that we often talk about. We talk about it all throughout our culture. We talk about it for our kids, for our schools. But it's also something that we do see within Scripture. Over the course of the next 5 weeks, we're going to be looking at this passage quite often. It's the first part of Romans 12:2. This is what it says, right? Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewals of your mind. You see, Lighthouse Church, we believe that God can transform lives. Amen? But that means we also have to believe that he can transform our minds. And if we believe this, if we really believe this, then mental health is something that we shouldn't just talk about, but it should be something that we welcome that conversation. Because I don't know about the church you grew up in, like this just isn't a conversation that happened in most churches that I grew up in. It's not, I don't think that anyone was against it. It just isn't something that we did. Mental health like that, well, we only talk about that for the crazy people. But how many people feel like they've been one of the crazy people the last 2 years? Because while the vernacular has changed over time, we still use these same terms that we're stressed out, we're overwhelmed, we're depressed, we're anxious. In fact, aren't the words work and stress seem to be synonymous sometimes? Anybody ever have a job and not at some level be stressed? Yeah, because if you're not stressed, you probably don't have a job. Right? I mean, we feel this over the last 2 years, whether it's been political decisions or even local politics decisions. Even this week in Douglas County, there's been stress and anxiety and tension about our local school politics. Whether it's works or the projects, whether it's family, right? We are overwhelmed. And the truth is, we've never lived in a time where depression and anxiety are more rampant than they are right now. Early studies from the past 2 years are coming back to suggest all of us are going to have PTSD from what we've gone through in 2020 and 2021. In fact, what our brains, the information that we have taken in, will impact how we even physically interact with others. Did you know that we've actually learned more about the brain in the last 20 years than we have in all years preceding that? We know more about the brain today, significantly more, than we did in 1999. Here's a couple interesting facts for you, because as I definitely watched like 1,000 TED Talks this week and read all these like articles and books on the brain, I learned a few things. And one of them is this: scientists who study the brain estimate that a healthy human brain processes anywhere to 18 to 640 billion signals every second. That's not like 18, that's 18 billion to 640 billion processes. That's like a full process. That's not a synapse firing. That's in the trillions every second. Every second. And here's the thing. Almost all of this is completely subconscious to you. Your brain is on overdrive doing all of these things. And you don't have to worry about it. But that's okay, because we find other things to worry about, don't we? Because while all this is going on in the background, and by the way, right, you can read and look at the advancement of supercomputers to the point of processing at the rate of a human brain. We're still years and years and years away from a computer being able to process that fast, right? But you can look at all of the science about the brain, about what goes on in the background, but the important stuff to us is what's going on in the foreground. Because the truth is, we think a lot. And while we're processing 640 billion processes every second of the day, there's also things that are in the front of our minds that we're thinking through too. In fact, the average person has an estimated 6,200 unique thoughts every single day. And when I say unique thoughts, I mean like, hey, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? Hey, what am I going to have for breakfast? Ooh, what am I going to have for lunch? Ooh, what am I going to have for second dinner tonight? I wonder if Crumble Cookie is still open. Like, those are unique thoughts, but not just things about food. It's anything from work, decisions, the thoughts that end up coming out of our mouths, the things that we never want anyone else to know that we think about, the really weird stuff. You ever go back and are thinking about something and backtrack how you got to that? Like, what a weird process. Because thoughts lead to thoughts, lead to thoughts, lead to thoughts. And what we end up having is 6,200 unique thoughts every single day. That's a lot. That's a whole lot. It is, it's tiring, it's exhausting. But here's the problem too. I don't know if it's a problem, but this is the reality. Thoughts don't just remain thoughts. They influence our actions. They influence our emotions, our state of being. And the truth is this: there is a fight, there's a battle going on for your mind. Look with me in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. In verse 3 it says this: "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh." There is a war going on. "For the weapons of our warfare are not flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds and to destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. We destroy arguments of every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God. And then we take every thought captive. This seems impossible. Because out of those 6,200 thoughts, like sometimes the truth is I struggle just to keep one thought captive. And how do we do this? Do you take every thought captive? Is every thought that you have a thought that would be considered holy or good or righteous? You don't have to answer that. I know the answer. The answer is no, because you're human. But the truth is that there is a battle going on for your thoughts. As I was getting ready today, I was reading a book by Jenny Allen called Get Out of Your Head. Our women's ministry actually did a Bible study on this last year. And she had a great quote. Because out of everything that, all the studies that she was doing to get ready to write this book, she started observing certain things. And this is what she says she observed, is that our emotions lead us to thoughts. And those thoughts dictate our decisions. And our decisions determine behaviors. And then behaviors shape our relationships. All of which takes us back to either healthy or unhealthy thoughts. And it's a cycle that we give in. And our thoughts impact emotions, impact actions, impact relationships, which then we think about those relationships, but sometimes it's like bad and we don't like what those thoughts led to. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. If you'll bear with me for just a second, right? Imagine this is your brain. And these are different thoughts. And each one of these thoughts, let's say that this is a righteous thought, is a thought that we take captive, is a good, holy thought. We wake up in the morning and we think, you know what? I am going to work hard to take captive my thoughts today. I'm going to pray without ceasing all day. I'm going to be the perfect husband or wife. I'm going to be the best parent. I'm going to be a model employee, and I'm going to care for those around me, right? This is a thought that we have. But then we think, you know what? I forgot. I've got to get gas on the way to work. And then we think, I can't believe it snowed again last night. I'm going to be late to work. And our boss is already texting us. Oh, but we forgot on the way out the door that our wife asked us to take the dry cleaning to the dry cleaners. And then we start thinking, oh, wait, is there something else? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that PTO meeting tonight. And then work gets really stressful, and that email and that text message and that other email that all ask for the exact same things. They were like, I promise I'm working on it. I know what I have to get done. And then our wife texts, say, hey, what do you want for dinner tonight? And that thought never grabs hold. What do we want for dinner tonight? And you're like, I don't care. Can't you ever just make that decision? While at the same time, she's over here thinking, can't you ever just make that decision? And then we get that other text and that other email, and we're going, man, I wonder how many PTO days I have, because I could really use a vacation right now. And then we remember, oh, our kid has that soccer game after school today, but I cannot believe this. I scheduled that meeting at the same time. And now we're stressed and we're anxious because we don't want our kid to feel like that we don't love them. We feel like we're failing as a parent. But then we have to make sure that we go to work and do our job. And then there's the guilt because we also remember we missed those last 2 games. And then there's the thought that, oh, what are the other things I've missed? Well, we haven't done date night in I don't know how many months now. Well, I guess we'll just watch that movie again this week. Oh, wait, what about that TV show we never finished? Why didn't we finish that? Oh, that's right, because I had to go on that work trip. And then we decide we're going to leave and go home early. Only to remember that we forgot that meeting and we're having to rush back out the door to do it. And we're getting texts, we're getting phone calls. We missed the soccer game. Now we've got to pick up dinner and we don't know what anybody wants. Feel like we're failing as a parent. And finally we get home, turn on the TV, and your wife says, oh, what about that PTO meeting we're supposed to go to? And in the meantime, all of these thoughts are fighting for our mind. And it's at that moment we go, oh, I was going to take captive these thoughts. And we're anxious and we're frustrated. And we know this isn't how I want to live. And so we even try to grab back at that thought. And then our emotions spill over. We're fighting with people that we love. And we're living in a life that we never intended. We want to be a good husband or a good wife. We want to be a follower of Christ that impacts all these areas. Not that we're fighting to keep hold of that, but the truth is there is a battle going on for each and every one of your thoughts. There's a battle for your mind. And toxic thoughts are more than distractions. They can be used as tools against you in spiritual warfare. And as long as we approach our thoughts and our mental health as strictly a scientific approach, we're going to miss the fact that it impacts our hearts and who we are for Jesus. Look at this in Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. It says, "If then you are raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things." And we go, well, how can I possibly do that? It feels like the anxiety and the stress and the depression and the frustration and the discouragement. And while we have some good thoughts, it just feels like they're few and far between. And it's impacting everything around us. How do we do this? Because the truth is, the thought process of a believer, it should be different. We have to put it in terms of our spiritual lives as well. Because if how we approach our thinking and mental health is the same as non-believers, we are living in a reality that doesn't allow Jesus the space to transform. And remember earlier you said that you believe Jesus can transform your mind. Then we have to be willing to live in that reality where our mind impacts us, even on a spiritual level. And that it's not just a battle for our thoughts, it's a spiritual war that we are in. And mental health is more than just a scientific approach, it's a spiritual pursuit as well. Look at this in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 14 through 16. It says, "The natural person," that's the non-believer, "the natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God. For they are folly to him," they're foolish. "And he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ." This is what this means, right? Non-believers can't discern the spiritual impact their mind has on them because they don't fully understand that spiritual realm. And what it means for us to have the mind of Christ isn't just how we think, but it's how we think and how it impacts our hearts in the spiritual warfare that we are in. Because you can have the mind of Christ. Because of what Christ accomplished for us on the cross, we have the ability to see that this isn't just a scientific pursuit, but one that impacts our spirit as well. And I'll be honest, guys, this isn't easy. There's a reason we're doing a whole series on this and not just one Sunday. Because mental health isn't something that's easy. And hear me out too. What I'm not saying is that we can just Jesus all the problems away. And we'll talk about this in the coming weeks. But what I am saying is that we can't separate our faith life from our mental health. We just can't do it. Look with me at this chapter in Psalm. It's actually one of my favorite Psalms. It's Psalms 139. I memorized this Psalm, I think, when I was in the 10th grade. This is what Psalm 139 says. It's written by David, by King David. The same David and Goliath, that David, right? He wrote this, and this is what he says. "O Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and you are acquainted, or you know all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, you know it altogether." NIV says, you know it completely. "You hem me in behind and before, you laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge, or your knowledge, is too wonderful for me. It is too high that I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into the heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take to the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. You form my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance, and in your book were written every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them. You knew every day of my life before one of them happened. What David is doing is he's showing us the difference between David's thoughts and his knowledge and the immense, powerful knowledge of God. God knows everything. He's immensely powerful. You cannot hide from him. But then he talks about God's thoughts in this process too, right? Look at this. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I would count them, they would be more than sand. NIV says, if I were to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. I awake and I am still with you. Oh, that you would slay the wicked, O God. O men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? Do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. And then I love this last part. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me or test me and know my thoughts. And see if there is any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. It's a powerful, powerful psalm. It's one of my favorite. I often pray it and read it. But in it, I want to look for just a second about what it says about our thoughts and God's thoughts, because there's a parallel that it draws, really a contrast between how we think and how God thinks. You see, God knows our thoughts. And he understands why we think the way we think. It says that in verses 3 and 4, it says, you know my thoughts completely, O God, right? Even before a word is on my tongue, you know it, all of it. He knows everything we're going to think or say. In fact, it says that every single day of our life, he knew before any of them existed. He knows the decisions you are going to make before you make them. Science says that your brain knows the decision you're going to make 7 seconds before you make it. Now, if you've ever been cliff jumping, you could argue you're not sure that's the case. Because when I did that, I was in the air and still hadn't decided if I was going to jump yet. But science says your brain actually knows that 7 seconds before you make the decision. But what it says, right, that seems pretty impressive. God knew that before you were born. All your days, he knows it. He knows every thought that you have, the great ones, the ones that make you who you are, and the ones you are so afraid anyone's ever going to find out. The things that you're so ashamed of. He knows them completely. But then there's another contrast we see, because as David draws this comparison between his thoughts and God's, we know that God can easily know and understand all of our thoughts, but the magnitude of God's thoughts is overwhelmingly vast. It says if you were to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. You know how many grains of sand there are on earth? No, what? You didn't do the study? Because I looked this up. And I found one person estimates that there are 7 quintillion, 500 quadrillion grains of sand. And that's just on the beaches and deserts. That doesn't include all the sandboxes or the ocean floor, which is the largest part of planet Earth. Right? What David is trying to point out is God's thoughts are immense. Your thoughts are 6,200 a day. Like that is nothing compared to the thoughts of God. Keep in mind, it says that we have the mind of Christ. That is what we have. Not that you're going to have that many thoughts. I'm not sure I want that many thoughts in a day. But that God is the God that is on your side, that knows every single day of your life before one of them came to be. You see, David asks God to search his heart and to test his thoughts so that David could walk as a man transformed by the power of God. And believe me when I say that there is a battle for your mind. And God has the power to transform your mind. And we have to believe this. Or else what are we doing in church? What's the purpose of us studying Scripture to be better men and women? What is the purpose of us being a church that believes in the transformative power of Jesus? And I hope you're encouraged by this because it encourages me that you can live a life of mental health out of the transformative power of Jesus. And over the next several weeks, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about some of the practicalities of this and what it looks like. And we'll talk about different resources. But this is the first one I want to suggest to you. And it's going to seem simple, but it's something that I've been talking about for several weeks now. We really emphasized it last week at Vision Night. You want to see an immediate impact? This is what I would ask you to do. Start praying. Science and research has actually done brain scans of people while they're praying, and there is something that it physically does to your brain to bring you peace. But as believers, we believe there's also that we don't do it for the physical transformation, we do it for the spiritual transformation. So here's my request, is that you start praying. Because science says it's going to make a difference, but I also believe in a God that has told me it's going to make a difference. Because the transformative power of Jesus is the transformative power I want to experience in my life and in my mind. I want to take captive those thoughts. And I think you do too. So we're going to keep talking about this. And over the next several weeks, we'll talk about lies and breaking the patterns of believing lies. We'll talk about anxiety and depression. But it starts with us making a decision that, hey, we want to have a healthy mental life. We want to win the war for our minds. And we want to take captive every thought. And we want to be transformed. I have one more request for you, and then I'm going to pray. I think that each of us knows someone that could also benefit from this. So here's my other request. I'm going to ask you that if you know someone you think this would be good for, you invite them. You ask them to join you on a Sunday morning as we have these conversations. Again, many churches that you grew up in and that I grew up in, these aren't conversations that we have in church. But I think we should change that. And I think it's an incredible opportunity to invite people in. Let us be the kingdom of God and show them that Jesus can transform their hearts and Jesus can transform their minds. Okay? It's a big request. And here's the thing. Your thought is going to say, oh, you can't do that. It's too embarrassing. Like, they're just going to say no. Dig down deep and find the better thought. Start winning the war by taking captive that thought.